when I handed my son the keys to my restaurant and said, 31 years of my life are in that building. Take care of her. He shook my hand, looked me dead in the eye, and said, Dad, I've got this. 8 months later, I found out he'd already signed half of it away to his wife's family. 3 weeks after that, they came to my door asking me to co-sign a loan to save what was left. I told them to get off my porch. The pork chops were resting under foil when I heard his car in the driveway. I had made his mother's recipe: thick cut, apple butter glaze, roasted fingerling potatoes on the side. Set the table with the good plates, the ones we only used for Sunday dinners and holidays. My son Owen and his wife Sabrina were coming over to celebrate the 1-year mark of the transition. 1 year since I handed him Leland's, the barbecue restaurant I'd built from nothing on the east side of Columbus, Ohio. 1 year since I finally let myself believe the hard part was over. I heard 2 car doors, then footsteps on the porch. When I opened the door, Owen smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Sabrina stood half a step behind him, looking at her phone. She gave me a quick hug that felt like a handshake. Come in. Dinner's almost ready. We sat down. I poured sweet tea. Owen kept straightening his fork. Sabrina hadn't put her phone away yet. Dad, there's something we need to talk to you about. I set down the pitcher. What he told me next didn't come out clean. It came out in pieces, with pauses and false starts, and Sabrina filling in the parts he stumbled over. The short version: 8 months ago, Owen had taken on a silent business partner. Sabrina's father, a man named Cliff, had invested $180,000 in exchange for a 40% ownership stake in Leland's. The paperwork had been filed with the state of Ohio. It was done. I asked Owen to repeat himself. He did. I had given Owen the restaurant outright. No debt, no mortgage, no liens. 31 years of 6-day weeks, and I handed it to him free and clear because he was my son, and I believed in him. And 8 months in, without a single phone call to me, he had sold nearly half of it to his father-in-law. Sabrina's voice was patient, like she was explaining something to a child. Her father had experience in the restaurant industry. He'd helped modernize the point-of-sale system. He had ideas about expanding the catering side of the business. I said, Sabrina, I didn't ask. Owen said, Dad, you're retired. You didn't need to be involved in every decision. The word retired landed wrong. I wasn't retired. I had stepped back. There's a difference. I handed my son the thing I spent my life building because I thought he was ready, not because I was done caring about it. I asked one question. Did you need the money, or did you want the partnership? Owen looked at the table. That was my answer. I stood up, walked to the front door, and held it open. I told them both that dinner was getting cold and I'd lost my appetite. Sabrina started to say something about being reasonable. Owen tried to catch my eye. I waited by the door until they left, watched Owen's taillights disappear down the street, came back inside, turned off the oven, sat down at the kitchen table. The pork chops went into the trash untouched. I didn't go to bed that night. I went to my filing cabinet in the spare room, the one Barbara always called my command center before she passed. I pulled out the accordion folder I kept for Leland's, every document from the day I opened until the day I signed it over. Business license. Health permits, the original lease from 1993 when the rent was $100 a month, and I had to borrow against my truck to cover the deposit. I opened my laptop and started pulling up what I could find publicly. Ohio Secretary of State business filings. There it was. Leland's Smokehouse LLC amended operating agreement filed 7 months ago. Owen Leland Marsh listed as managing member, 60%. Cliff Rutherford listed as silent partner, 40%. 7 months ago, I had called Owen to wish him happy birthday. We talked for 40 minutes about the new smoker he was thinking about buying, and whether pecan wood was worth the price difference over hickory. He never said a word. I opened a spreadsheet, started putting in numbers the way I always did when I needed to think clearly. Business value at time of transfer, based on the appraisal I'd commissioned before signing it over, $620,000. 40% of that gone to Cliff Rutherford for $180,000, a discount of nearly $70,000 from fair market value. Owen had undersold a piece of what I gave him and didn't tell me. I kept going. I'd been helping Owen financially since before the restaurant transfer. Covered his family's health insurance for 3 years when he was working his way up, $1,140 a month. Paid off his truck when he and Sabrina had their first child and cash was tight, $24,000. Fronted him $30,000 when the restaurant's walk-in cooler Died the summer after I transferred ownership. He called it a loan. He'd never mentioned paying it back. I wrote down every figure, slow and careful, the way my father taught me to check a column of numbers twice before you trust it. The total sat at the bottom of the page, like something I should have seen coming. Around 2 in the morning, I made a decision. Not out of anger, I was past anger by then, but out of the same clarity I used to feel when a supplier was shorting me on delivery weight and I had to decide whether to renegotiate or find someone else. You can't keep doing business with people who think you won't notice. I wrote down 4 things on a notepad. Call my attorney in the morning. Pull the $30,000 loan documentation. Request the full amended operating agreement through proper channels. Revisit my estate plan. Owen wasn't getting another dollar. Not a bridge loan. Not a cosign. Not a quiet transfer when times got hard. Whatever he and Cliff built together from here, they'd build without me. My attorney was a man named Ted Garfield, who'd handled every business contract I'd signed for 22 years. I was in his office at 8:45 the next morning, with my folder and my notes. He read through what I'd brought him, asked a few quiet questions, read some more. He didn't do anything illegal, Ted said finally. You gave him the business outright. It was his to do with as he chose. I know that, but the loan is documented, every dollar. Then we send a formal demand letter, 30 days to repay or we pursue it. I told him yes. Then I told him I wanted to look at my estate plan. My will currently left everything to Owen. The house, my retirement accounts, a brokerage account I'd been building for 20 years, a small commercial property I rented out in Hilliard that I'd bought the year Barbara died because I needed something to do with my hands. Ted pulled up the documents. We spent 2 hours going through it. By the time I left, I had instructed him to begin drafting a new will. The house would go to my brother Dennis and his wife if I passed before them, then to a list of charitable beneficiaries. The commercial property and brokerage account would fund a small scholarship through the culinary arts program at Columbus State. The same program where Owen had taken his first real cooking class, the one that made me believe he had the fire for this business. The retirement accounts, I'd need to update the beneficiary designations separately. Owen would receive nothing. I drove home and made myself breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, coffee. Sat at the kitchen table and ate the whole thing while it was still hot. My phone buzzed twice before noon. Both times Owen. I let it go to voicemail both times. The third call came from a number I didn't recognize. I answered. It was Cliff Rutherford. His voice was pleasant in a way that felt practiced. He said he understood there'd been some confusion about the business arrangement. Said he and Owen had meant to loop me in sooner, but things had moved quickly. Said he had a lot of respect for what I'd built at Leland's, and he hoped we could sit down together, the 3 of us, and get on the same page. I said there was nothing on my page that needed his input. Then I hung up. That evening, Owen came to my house without calling first. I saw his truck in the driveway from the kitchen window. He knocked. I didn't answer. He knocked again, longer this time. Said my name through the door. Dad, I know you're home. Your car's here. I just need 5 minutes. I stayed at the kitchen table. I should have told you. I know that. I was going to. It happened fast and I didn't know how to explain it. And Sabrina thought. I stopped listening after that, not out of cruelty, but because I'd heard this shape of sentence before. Passive explanations that end with someone else's name in the last clause. Nothing in what he was saying told me it wouldn't happen again. He left a note under the door. I read it later. He said he was sorry, said Cliff's involvement had been necessary, that the business had hit a rough patch right after the transfer and he hadn't wanted to come to me hat in hand. Said he'd been trying to stand on his own 2 feet. Said he hoped I could understand that. I understood it. I just didn't believe it was the whole story. I called an accountant, a forensic one, recommended by Ted, named Jim Bowers. I explained what I knew and what I suspected. He said he could take a look at the business financials from the period right after the transfer. Since I had co-signed some early operating agreements before I fully stepped back, I might have standing to request certain records. He came back to me a week later. The rough patch Owen mentioned in his note? It was real, but it was smaller than he'd made it sound. A slow quarter, some equipment repairs, nothing that would have required a $180,000 infusion. Nothing that wouldn't have been manageable with a line of credit from the bank, which Owen was qualified to get. What Jim found instead was that Cliff Rutherford had been using the partnership as a vehicle to funnel catering contracts to a company he already owned. Leland's would get the booking, do the work, and then pay a referral fee back to Cliff's events company for the lead. Except Cliff's company had generated exactly 0 of those leads. The clients had come in through Leland's existing relationships, many of them built over 30 years while I was still running the place. Owen had signed off on the fee arrangement. I sat with that information for a long time. I am not a man who shows a lot. Barbara used to say I process things like I was diffusing a bomb, very slowly, very carefully, and without any visible expression on my face. She wasn't wrong. But that evening, alone in the house she and I had shared for 27 years, I let myself feel the full weight of what my son had done. Not just the money, the deliberateness of it, the months of phone calls about nothing, of Sunday dinners, of him looking me in the eye knowing what he'd signed and never saying a word. I didn't sleep well that night. But when I woke up in the morning, I was done grieving it. Jim's findings went into a folder alongside Ted's demand letter and the public filings. I started building the kind of documentation I used to keep when a vendor was shaving margin, and I needed to be ready before I confronted them. Dates, amounts, signed agreements, email trails Jim had helped me pull from the shared business accounts. 3 folders, one for me, one for Ted, one in the safe deposit box at Huntington Bank. About 2 weeks into all of this, I started noticing things in my social circle. My neighbor Chuck had run into Owen at the hardware store and asked if everything was all right between us. A woman I knew from church mentioned that Sabrina had said I'd had a falling out with the family and wasn't taking it well. Sabrina had told their friends I was struggling with retirement, that I had been interfering in the business, and Owen had been trying to manage my involvement gracefully, that this had been building for a while. I didn't say anything to Chuck or the woman from church, just nodded and said families were complicated, but I called Ted that night. He said what I already knew. The court of public opinion is a different court, and the only way to address it is with facts, calmly stated to the right people. The Columbus Restaurant Association held its annual dinner the first Thursday of November. I had attended every year since 1998, had a plaque on the wall from when they gave me the Legacy Award in 2019. Owen had been pushing to become more active in the association since taking over Leland's. It was good for business, and I'd encouraged him to go. I found out from the event coordinator, a woman I'd worked with for over a decade, that Owen and Sabrina were registered, that they'd be sit the industry table near the front. I registered too. Sent in my dues. Bought my ticket. Ted asked me if I was ready, on the phone the night before. I told him I'd been ready since I found the filing. The dinner was held at a hotel ballroom downtown. White tablecloths, cash bar, local chefs presenting small plates between awards. I arrived early, found my table, ordered a club soda, said hello to people I'd known for decades, talked about the industry, about whether the new health code amendments would affect staffing, about who made the best brisket in Central Ohio. Owen and Sabrina came in around 7. He saw me across the room. Something moved across his face. Surprise or calculation, it was hard to tell from a distance. He lifted his hand in a small wave. I looked at him for a moment, then looked away. The program started at 7:30. Awards for Best New Restaurant, for Community Partnership, for Culinary Innovation. The kind of evening that used to make me feel proud to be part of this industry. During the break between the 3rd and 4th awards, Owen walked to the podium. He wasn't on the program. He'd spoken to someone on the committee, apparently. Gotten himself a moment at the microphone. He said he wanted to take a minute to acknowledge his father. Said Leland's wouldn't exist without me. Said he'd been learning what it meant to step into shoes that were hard to fill, and that there'd been some tension between us lately that he hoped they could work through as a family. Said he knew his dad was in the room tonight, and he wanted him to know the door was always open. Every head turned toward me. I took my napkin off my lap, set it on the table, stood up, walked to the podium. Owen stepped to the side and handed me the microphone with a look I recognized. The same look he'd given me the night he told me about Cliff. Half apology, half dare. I looked out at the room. Industry people, colleagues, restaurant owners I'd competed with and collaborated with for 30 years. I said, "Thank you, Owen. Since you've opened the door, I'd like to walk through it." I talked for about 4 minutes. No notes. I didn't need them. I told them I had given my son a restaurant valued at over $600,000, free and clear, because I believed he was ready and because it was his legacy. I told them that 8 months later he sold a 40% stake to his father-in-law without telling me, at below market value, and that I'd found out when I invited them to dinner. I told them that a forensic accountant had uncovered an internal fee arrangement that funneled business revenue back to a company the partner already owned, using client relationships I had built over 30 years. I told them I had responded by sending a formal demand letter for a documented $30,000 loan, revising my estate plan, and making sure everything was on record. I told them I loved my son, that I had spent 31 years building something so he'd have a foundation to stand on, that I hadn't done it so someone else could come in the back door while I was standing at the front. I set the microphone down. The room was quiet for a moment. Then someone at the back started clapping. Then the table next to me. By the time I got back to my seat, most of the room was standing. Owen and Sabrina left before the dessert course. I stayed for the whole program. Ate the chocolate cake. Talked to an old friend named Walter. Different Walter than anyone in this story. Just a guy I'd known since we both had restaurants on the same block in the 90s about whether the city's new outdoor dining permits were worth the application hassle. It was a good evening. On my way home, I called Ted. Told him how it went. He was quiet for a second, then said, "Good. Let the record stand." The demand letter had gone out 3 weeks before. Owen had not responded to it through his attorney. He had until the end of the month. 2 days later, Sabrina called me. I answered because I wanted to know which direction this was coming from. Her voice was controlled but thin at the edges. She said I had humiliated her husband in front of the entire industry. Said I didn't understand the pressure Owen had been under. Said her father had done nothing but try to help, that the fee arrangement was standard practice. That if I had just talked to Owen instead of building a legal case behind his back, none of this would have happened. I let her finish. Then I said that Owen had 8 months to talk to me. He chose not to. She said I was punishing her family because I couldn't let go of a business I'd already given away. I said I'd mailed her father's attorneys the accountant's report that morning. Then I said goodbye and ended the call. The month closed out. Owen didn't repay the loan. Ted filed to pursue it. What came next happened slowly, the way consequences usually do when there's no drama left to cushion them. Cliff Rutherford's attorney sent a response letter that was confident in tone but thin on substance. The fee arrangement, examined under Ohio partnership law, sat in a gray area, not clearly illegal, but enough that Cliff seemed to want it to go away quietly. Within 10 days, his attorney proposed a settlement. Cliff would exit the partnership, relinquish his 40% stake back to Owen, and pay a sum that Ted and I negotiated to cover the value of the diverted catering fees. Owen got his restaurant back, clean, the way I'd given it to him. He didn't call me to say thank you. I didn't expect him to. I signed the new will in Ted's office on a Thursday morning, same fountain pen I'd used to sign the original transfer papers. The culinary scholarship was named for Barbara. It would fund 2 students a year, kids learning the trade, learning what it meant to work in a kitchen before you got to run one. Ted notarized the last page, pressed his seal into the paper. Done. That weekend, I drove out to the commercial property in Hilliard, just to look at it. Small strip building, 3 tenants, a dry cleaner, a tactile prep office, a woman who ran an alteration shop out of the end unit. I'd fixed the parking lot lights myself in the first year I owned it, patched the roof the year after. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid and it was mine. I sat in my truck for a while, watching Saturday morning happen. The dry cleaner opening her roll down. A man walking his dog on the sidewalk, ordinary life moving forward the way it does. Owen's truck pulled into the lot. I saw it before he saw me. He parked 3 spaces down, got out slowly. He looked tired in a way that had settled into him, the kind of tired that isn't about sleep. He walked over and stood next to my truck. I rolled down the window. He said he didn't know I'd be here. I said it was my property. He stood there a moment. Then he said he was sorry. Not a long speech, not a list of reasons, just that he was sorry, and that he'd spent the last month trying to figure out what had gotten into him, and that he didn't have a good answer for it. I didn't tell him it was fine, because it wasn't. I didn't tell him we were all right, because I didn't know if that was true yet. I told him I had loved his mother for 32 years, and the thing I missed most about her wasn't the big moments. It was that she was someone I could trust completely. I said that was the hardest thing to replace once it was gone. He looked at the pavement for a while. Then he said, "I know, Dad." I told him to take care of his restaurant. Do right by the staff, they'd been there since my time. Keep his books clean. If he ever needed real help, not money, but real help, to call me. He nodded, said okay, said he would. He walked back to his truck, pulled out of the lot. I watched him go. I didn't know if he'd call. I didn't know if we'd get back to Sunday dinners and phone calls about pecan wood. Some things heal, some things leave scar tissue, and that's the best you get. What I knew was this. I had built something honest. I'd protected what I could protect. I'd put my name on a scholarship that would outlast both of us. And whatever came next, I'd face it the same way I'd faced everything since 1993. Steady, clear-eyed, and without anybody else's hand in my wallet. I started the truck and headed home. Made a grocery run on the way. Picked up pork chops because it was Saturday, and I hadn't made that recipe since the night this all started. This time, I ate at my own table, alone, and every bite was exactly right.